is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 10th, 2025. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Kelly Carter Jackson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, author of We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. Also on the program today, Vance, Trump's lawyers start floating the idea that they can ignore the U.S. federal courts. Meanwhile, Musk and Russell Vogt shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because you wouldn't want those scams to be shut down either.
I mean, come on. We need to efficiently scam people.
Meanwhile, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau union sues to keep the agency open. Federal judge halts Doge's access to the Treasury payment system. And a Trump-appointed federal judge forces Trump's U.S. aid shutdown to freeze, I should say.
Rhino.
Court hearing today on the legality of Trump and Musk's illegal worker buyout. Trump announces a 25% tariff on all foreign steel and aluminum, but quietly they paused the de minimis tariffs on China. Steve Wynn, remember that old predator? He petitioned Supreme Court to overturn libel laws in this country. And the NIH cuts biomedical funding and caps the use of its funds to 15% for operational costs. And lastly, and not necessarily unrelated to things, measles outbreak in Texas County amongst children with low vaccination rates. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Fun day, asterisk, Monday.
Yeah. I don't know. Gold Rush John on the IM just suggested welcome more of this shit Monday. And
That's apt.
we may have to actually like revisit, maybe put these rhyming things that we have with the days back up on the whiteboard.
Perhaps.
That we have in the R&D section of our office.
Right. We got to check with Soros first, but
Yeah, of course. We always check with Soros. Folks, apologize up front. My voice is bad. I've been was battling a cold over the weekend. It's more than likely I'll have at least 3 or 4 coughing fits during the show. And I am not doing a Bobby Kennedy impression. Just want to tell people that.
all right.
I called a couple people over the weekend and they just was like laughing, like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I know, this is just how I sound."
It's the rasp.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Measles, I don't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Not in Texas.
We'll probably get to that later, but like it was an area in West Texas that I think 18% of the kids there are unvaccinated. And of course, measles is breaking out. And for all the people dunking on that area on social media and saying, "Oh, look what you get," the problem is that it spreads. That's the problem to people, even if they have protected themselves.
Also, stop doing the "look what you get" thing.
Yes, I can't stand that.
People overrate how bad it is to have that. It's a little rash.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it. All right. So this is a big deal, the NIH thing. And it's immediate. It's happening right now. Literally, as we speak, there are professors, researchers, other people working at universities and more. The knock-on effects of this are going to be huge, who are finding out that they're going to have to be let go, or that their program is suddenly unfunded. The NIH, well, here, let's play this clip. This is the biggest issue in this NIH thing. I have the wrong piece of paper in front of me.
What you looking for?
The NIH story. Yeah, one more. Sorry, folks. Here it is. Okay. Trump administration cutting billions of dollars in biomedical research funding. This is, according to the Washington Post, alarming academic leaders who said it would imperil their universities and medical centers, and drawing swift rebukes from Democrats who predicted dire consequences for scientific research. Honestly, I don't know who wrote this. I don't have the byline on this, but I can't imagine a more pathetic, and I feel like I could spend a week with a media critique class to explain why this paragraph is just horseshit. It's not just rebukes from Democrats. In a moment, we're going to see like full-on Republican senators going like, hey, wait a second. So it's not just Democrats, and it's not just alarming academic leaders, because in that same piece about a Republican senator begging for this not to happen, you have other people saying like, hey, wait a second. This university is the largest employer, not in the city, not in the town it's in the entire state. So it's not just that it's alarming academic leaders. It's alarming a lot of other people, too. I'm not an academic leader.
I mean, these aren't the NIH cuts, but in terms of like just general federal workforce, I was seeing NPR was saying that in Kansas City, the federal government is the largest employer.
Of course. But this is stuff that we have to be on the lookout in all of the press now, of making this like it's a he said, she said. There is no, it's 12 noon, but is it really the middle of the day? People who are interested in clocks, they say it is, but other people say it's not.
Both sides.
The move announced Friday night by the National Institutes of Health drastically cuts its funding for indirect costs related to research. Okay. And this indirect thing is also, like, it's an indirect cost in this office would theoretically be like a desk or a computer. I mean, I don't.
Internet service.
Internet service.
What would be a direct cost on the other side of things?
Well, let's say you're doing research on, I don't know, some type of chemical. The purchase of the chemical might be a direct cost.
Okay. Seems like we're splitting hairs here to give a lot of credibility to the Republican administration. So Sammy's got the coughs, but maybe it's a good opportunity then. Do you want to play number 4?
Play this clip.
Yeah. So this is a Fox contributor, Nicole Safer, and she here is talking about how she knows people, federal employees and health agencies, and how it's going to affect them.
Honest, I have a lot of colleagues who are really upset right now. They're very concerned that the funding for their research that they're doing is going to be cut off. I mean, we do a lot of valuable research in the cancer community, and I keep telling to people, like, you just have to give it a pause right now. I think DOGE is probably one of the greatest things to happen in U.S. history, but change is hard. I can empathize with these Democrats right now. It's really hard. And in hospital systems, like, we have to do these huge electronic medical record transfers. And that makes me want to retire and quit my job because it is so hard and there's so much work, but it doesn't mean it's not for the greater good of things. And so while I think a part of them just wants to keep it, they want to keep control of the money, but I also think it's really hard to accept change. And Elon Musk with DOGE, I truly believe are doing great things, and they are going to weed out the waste and make sure that what deserves funding should get funding. But I will be honest, I have a lot of...
I wish they had brought the laughter up and moved it up closer to when they were talking about. I have friends who are not being able to do their cancer research. And it's Democrats. Remember, Democrats are upset about this. Every cent of hard-earned taxpayer money should be spent efficiently, judiciously, and accountably, without exception. While the administration works to achieve this goal at the NIH, a smart, targeted approach is needed in order not to hinder life-saving, groundbreaking research at high-achieving institutions like those in what state? Can you guess what state it is? What state does this Democrat calling for an exception to these cuts, to the NIH grants that are being cut?
Whoops.
Is it Massachusetts? Is it New York? It's got to be California. Oh, wait a second. No. Let's just start at the top of the alphabet. It's Alabama. That quote is from U.S. Senator Katie Britt.
Oh, Antifa, obviously.
Uh-huh.
She woke.
Totally woke.
This is from the AL.com. Currently, some universities receive 50% or more amount of a grant to put towards support staff and other needs, but that would be capped at 15%. This is according to the AP.
So workers.
Yeah, everybody, everything they need to do this. The University of Alabama at Birmingham and the University of Alabama in Huntsville are examples of state institutions that could be affected by cuts. UAB alone has received more than $1 billion in NIH recent funding in recent years. Incidentally, the NIH said the change would save more than $4 billion a year, effective immediately. And the note highlighted, this is from the NIH, this is from that Washington Post story. The note highlighted the multi-billion-dollar endowments of Harvard University, Yale University, and Johns Hopkins University, implying that many universities do not need the added federal funding. But here comes Katie Britt. Wham! UAH, that's the is that what we're calling Harvard now? University at Harvard, is that what it is?
Not quite.
Oh no, that's University of Alabama, Huntsville. Also receives NIH funding. Steve Ammons, president of the Birmingham Business Alliance. Oh, wonder what this lefty has to say. Said he was unsure of the specific cuts, but, quote, certainly any reduction in funding would be a hit to UAB since they were in the top 30 for 2024 for NIH funding. Certainly something we need to watch and make sure we advocate for the states. You ready for this? Now, this is the state's largest employer. What private company owns University of Alabama? Does anybody know?
I do not know.
What private company is it? Can you look up the owners of the University of Alabama? This might be a company I want to invest in because this seems pretty big. They're the biggest employer in Alabama, the state. Anybody? It's the state of Alabama. What? It's government?
Employing people?
Wow.
Government doesn't create jobs. Will someone please let this guy from the what is it? The Business Alliance?
Check out Econ
Government
100.
doesn't create jobs. That's not really jobs.
2.3 million federal workers in this country, by the way.
And then the NIH, a federal program,
Yes.
funding the biggest employer in the state,
On top of that.
which is a state employer,
Right.
which is also government, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. Everything you have been told about all of this by the right is just a out and out lie. And this is a lie that's been existed for years and years. But because there is at least one senator in Alabama with integrity who will never veer from his absolute stupidity in every sector of governance. Tommy Tuberville supports the cuts. When the American people voted for President Trump on November 5th, they voted for his campaign promise to create the Department of Government Efficiency and cut waste in the federal government. I would be willing to bet that 85% of the people who voted for Donald Trump on the day of the election would have no idea what you were talking about.
Right.
And then another of that remaining 15%, half would just lie. And then there would be another 7% that would say, like, yeah, I think so.
Also, Tuberville coached at public land grant University Auburn, which I wonder what his salary was there as a state employee.
Interesting.
I'm sure he would have been able to do his job if he didn't have any support staff.
Support staff, yeah.
That's where we're at with the NIH funding. And just off the top of your heads, 2023, the top NIH grants, UC San Francisco, Hopkins, John Hopkins, University of Pennsylvania, that's in Pennsylvania, incidentally, Duke University, that's in North Carolina, University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, that's in Michigan. Those are all swing states. And with 2 Republican senators in North Carolina, 1 in Pennsylvania, and then Fetterman, who knows what he is. I wonder if he supports it. University of Pittsburgh, that's also in Pennsylvania. Mass General Hospital, just a bunch of hippies there. And Washington University in St. Louis, top NIH grants, at least in 2023. So, I think this is, we're going to see this resonate.
And it's just amazing to me that they're getting away with, like I just saw right before we went on air, that Jerry Connolly had said that the public gave Trump a mandate that things would be running efficiently. And in part, he has that mandate. Ken Klippenstein put out that quote.
Who said this?
Connolly.
Recently?
Yes, this morning.
Oh,
Jesus. That's the quote. But the point is just like, here is how you have to approach it. They're stealing from you. Our tax dollars go towards these kinds of programs. It goes to Medicare, it goes to Social Security. Yes, it goes to the military, but it also goes towards cancer research. It also goes towards the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has an $800 billion a year cost, but has returned $21 billion to consumers. Like, maybe that's inefficient, but when they see it. But the CFPB in part is also like efficient because it consolidated all of the enforcement mechanisms into one agency. So when they say efficiency, what they mean is cutting programs that your tax dollars were supposed to go towards to benefit their own ends and to reallocate those resources
every dollar
for their
the
project.
Consumer Financial Protection Bureau spends, which doesn't technically actually come from tax dollars. It actually comes from the Fed, but regardless, from fees. Every dollar returns about 20 to the consumer. And that's just in hard dollars. You don't know how much business has been done differently because they know the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau may come after them.
And I misspoke. Sorry. $800 million a year agency returned $21 billion to consumers. I was like, I knew I
1
wrote
to
that,
20.
wrote that down
let's not
incorrectly.
get caught up in the math.
Yes.
And I just recommend people look up their local areas research universities. I did mine in North Dakota, UND, and got this headline from 2023. UND's Department of Biomedical Sciences first among similar departments to receive NIH grants. Basically, it ranked for controlling for size. UND was taking the largest number of NIH grants.
Yeah, but what are they doing? Studying the spit of lizards or something?
There's some HIV research. There's some aging research. There's some cancer stuff. $700,000.
That's not important.
For some DNA repair stuff. So yeah, I mean that's just not going to Grand Forks now. But hey, the drone program hasn't been attacked because it looks like the Pentagon isn't a priority for all these
Try just eating
cuts.
Whole Foods. Don't worry about it. Okay, a couple words from our sponsors, and then in a moment we'll be talking to Kelly Carter Jackson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Wesley College, author of We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. First, word from our sponsor. It's still close to the beginning of the year. Every now and then we're reminded of those many healthy resolutions we made over the years. Lose weight, exercise more, eat better. But a goal without a plan is a plan to fail. Prolon's 5-day program Gives you the tool to put your health goals into action with a science-backed plan that makes it easy to stay focused and achieve real results. Prolon's fasting mimicking diet is a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at USC's Longevity Institute, backed by leading U.S. medical centers, Prolon helps support healthy blood sugar, enhanced skin appearance, fat loss, and improved energy and focus post-fast. It all starts with their 5-day program, snacks, soups, beverages designed to keep your body in a fasting state. No guesswork or planning required. 3 consecutive cycles of Prolon have been shown to reduce your biological age score by an average of 2.5 years and your waist circumference by 1.5 inches. I did this last year, around this time, actually. I'm gearing up to do it again. Fall was a little tricky for me. But it's basically because I would like to increase my average age potential.
Me as well.
And it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I did the show that week. I had a good energy. I wasn't constantly starving. I would have liked to eat more food, but you don't. But you really look forward to those like little crisps that you get at dinner. I'll tell you that.
Appreciate them, yeah.
But I had great energy. I felt good. The whole thing was much easier than I had anticipated. Check it out if this is something that you've been reading about, because it puts your body into a just different state by day like 4 and 5. Help you kickstart a health plan that truly works. Prolon is offering 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day nutrition program. Visit prolonlife.com/majority. That's PROLONLIFE, prolonlife.com/majority to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/majority. Also, this episode brought to you by Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks. Zippix brings you a totally satisfying, convenient, and great-tasting way to curb your nicotine cravings. Now you can get your nicotine fix anytime, anywhere, without having to rely on smoking or vaping. Zippix toothpicks give you an easier, better, more and more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 great long-lasting flavors. They have options in 2 milligrams and 3 milligrams of nicotine. So if you want to use this to get off those cigarettes or the vape, it's easy to titrate with these. Zippix toothpicks are perfect for flights, sporting events, restaurants, literally everywhere else that smoking and vaping are banned. They're one of the most cost-effective nicotine products on the market, proudly made in the U.S. If you're not a nicotine user, or if you're trying to get away from your nicotine habit, Zippix also offers caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks for a quick energy boost. So you could literally also, if you wanted to, like, get off the smokes, get into the toothpicks, work your way down the nicotine scale onto the caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks, which are my jam. Zippix have already helped hundreds of thousands of customers get their nicotine fix without needing to inhale smoke or vape oils. So what are you waiting for? Give your lungs a break. Try Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks. Ditch the cigarettes, ditch the vapes. Get some nicotine-infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. 10% off your first order by using the code MajorityReport at checkout. Your lungs will be glad you did. Must be 21 or older to order. Warning, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Link in the podcast and YouTube description. All right, quick break. Then we'll be talking to Kelly Carter-Jackson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, author of We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. We are back. Sam Cedar, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Kelly Carter-Jackson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, author of We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. Welcome to the program, Kelly.
Hey, happy Black History Month.
Thank you. You too. Let's start with, let me ask you, why this book for you, and in terms of like the timing context?
Oh man, so this book has been ruminating for years, really since 2020 is when I started writing it. And I tell everybody I wrote it because I was mad. I was angry, and I was frustrated at the way that the protests of 2020 had materialized and had not really led to like structural or systemic change. I'm frustrated with protests writ large and sort of like hashtag activism. And I wanted to also get outside of the bubble of like violence and nonviolence. I think we have these like really limiting ideas of what we think nonviolence is and what we think violence is. And I wanted to push back on that and kind of expand it and say, like, we have more than two tools, just, a hashtag or a protest or a Molotov cocktail. Like, there's got to be more tools in our tool belt than just those two ideas. And so this book, We Refuse, really is about looking at all the ways that Black people have resisted from the Haitian Revolution until this present moment.
Why do you think, and I know this is a little tangential to the book, and we'll get into that in a second, but why do you think that why do you think that those protests did not have the traction that in the moment it felt like they could have?
Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of groundswell. It felt like there were a lot of vibes, if you will.
Yeah, just in sheer numbers. I mean,
in sheer numbers, for sure.
I hadn't seen anything like that since maybe the Iraq War absolutely. And the number of protests, I don't think even existed during Iraq at that time. Even like Occupy, there was nothing really to rival that. It was close, but why do you think none of that?
I think part of the fact that we had so much attention, I think I give credit to the pandemic. I mean, people had paused globally. And so when something like George Floyd's murder goes viral, you have way more eyeballs on this event than you probably would have had there not been the pandemic, had we not been sort of forced to shut down and lock in. And I think people were paying attention, and people were upset, and people realized just how much racism is also a public health crisis. And there were so many things colliding in that moment that I think made sort of the nation come to a standstill. But I also think that in this country, we have a very difficult time, one, having conversations about race. We have an even more difficult time when it comes to doing systemic or structural change. If it costs us something, if we have to relinquish power or control, we have a hard time accomplishing that. And I think that for a lot of reasons, we didn't see the change that we wanted. We saw like street names change or statues come down, or Aunt Jemima got like a remix. And I'm like, this is not what we asked for. This is actually not what people petitioned for. People were talking about true police reform, like actually abolishing their police. People had revolutionary ideas. And those things never really got tackled in ways that I felt like were structural. We got more symbols. We got more trinkets because it's cheaper.
But I just, one more question. But why? I mean, because I hear you say like, it's true. Power is not going to relinquish. Nobody's going to relinquish power. Yeah. But what short circuited where the taking of that power did not happen?
I think that when it comes down to it, the hard truth is we have been unwilling to recognize our deep allegiance to white supremacy, our deep allegiance to power and position and privilege as white Americans, that people don't really want to let go of all of the advantages that allows, that fortifies them to have. And so you get a deep pushback. I mean, we've seen this throughout history. Every time you get Black history, even if that history is somewhat progressive, is even symbolically progressive, you get widespread backlash, political backlash, economic backlash, social backlash. You've seen it in Reconstruction. You've seen it in the 1920s and 30s. You've seen it in the Civil Rights Movement. And what we saw right after the summer of 2020 was deep political backlash. I mean, it's not a coincidence that January 6th happens right after that. There's anti-DEI backlash that sweeps across the country. People do not want to let go of their power and privilege and position. And I also think that we have seen that nonviolence, and in some cases when it comes down to protest and petitions and hashtags, it doesn't work. It's ineffective. And we need new tools. We need new ideas. We need to be creative about pushing ideas that really will work.
And how much of it is what you talk about? I guess the history of there's two things I feel like that work together here is like the individualization of racism as opposed to making it a systemic thing where people feel like it has to do with their own work internally as opposed to deep structural change, which I think benefits white supremacy. But really also that the other piece is the sanitization of violence in history in terms of Black resistance is really important here. Because, you know, there's a reason it's not in this country, but how long was Nelson Mandela on the U.S. terror watch list? What, until 2007, 2008? Can you speak about, like, where did that begin? Where did... maybe it's Reagan with MLK Day. Like, where did...
I mean, I think you're onto something. I mean, when we think about MLK, he was hated. He was despised. If he had poll numbers in the 1960s, they would have been in the low numbers. I mean, people did not like MLK, especially when he started speaking out against the Vietnam War, especially when he started talking about capitalism and basically saying, like, this is going to cost you. You've gotten civil rights on the cheap. You need to pay up. You know, we need to move into human rights and reparations. People didn't want to hear from King. And then after he got assassinated, and then decades later, we get this sanitized, very diluted version of King that's very much, nostalgic and romanticized. But that's not really what King was standing up for. I think we have amnesia when it comes to, like, our leaders. You know, when we think about Malcolm X and the idea that he was pushing this by any means necessary and really building global coalitions across people of color, the things that he was doing put a target on his back. And we forget those things. We forget the things that made people sort of unsavory. Even early in Nelson Mandela's career, he also had championed using force and using violence, and we forget that. And so I think history for me is the greatest weapon. It's one of the greatest tools that I have in sort of correcting the record and letting people know, hey, we have been here before. We have done this before. Here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't worked. and using history as a blueprint, if you will.
Let's start as we address these, and I think you just touched a little bit on chapter 3, force. You've divided the book into basically 5, I guess, elements of, within the spectrum of what, arrows in the quiver, I guess, of resistance. But let's start with your great-grandmother's resistance, because this is one where, I mean, she paid a price individually, but also she was faced with an individual price to pay otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about my grandmother, this is my grandmother Rita, my father's mother. When she passed away, we were cleaning out her apartment and we realized that she had a gun in her nightstand. And we were like, what? Grandma's got a gun? And, we were kind of shocked by that because I had, these, again, memories of my grandmother being this sweet lady that made like lemon meringue pie. I didn't think of her as someone who would be gun toting. And yet, when I think about how she grew up, my grandmother may have died in Detroit, but she was a Southerner. She was born in Louisiana. And she told me stories about how her brothers and her uncles would have to go to jail on the weekends. And I was like, what do you mean they have to go to jail on the weekends? And she would say, well, yeah, back then, all the white men would get drunk and they would lynch any Black man in town. So if you were already in jail, that was your alibi. And I just could not fathom prison being a safe space for Black men, prison being a space that would be a refuge on the weekends when white men are getting drunk and lynching anyone. And you didn't want someone to say that you had sexually assaulted or raped a white woman. And so you went to jail. And then on Sunday morning, you went out and you went to church. And that to me showed me that my grandmother was growing up in an environment where white terrorism was very real, and it was heightened on the weekends. It was weekly. And she had to protect herself. She had to arm herself. And I talk all in that chapter of Force about Black women in particular that have used their Second Amendment rights to defend themselves, particularly from the Ku Klux Klan, particularly from white supremacists that would try to firebomb their houses, that would try to destroy their communities. You know, people like Rosa Parks talked about how her kitchen table was covered with guns. Ida B. Wells talked about the importance of having guns in her home and protecting herself from the Klan. So these are the lived experiences that Black people face that we often don't talk about. Even MLK talked about his home being an arsenal. He had a friend who came over to his house and he was like, whoa, don't sit there. There's a whole bunch of guns and pistols underneath that seat. Like, he might have believed in nonviolence, but he also believed in self-defense, and he did not see them as in opposition.
What about Arnesta? I guess I'm thinking of too.
Oh, Arnesta. So Arnesta was my great grandmother who I opened the book with her. I talk about how when she was 9 years old, she stepped on a rusty nail and likely got tetanus, a serious bacterial infection, and she could have died. And my great grandmother took her really to the only white doctor she knew, this white man who lived in a big house.
When was this? What year? About
this
what year?
This is 1915. This is rural Alabama in 1915. So 50 years out from slavery. And this white doctor offers to help her. But in exchange, he says that Arnesta has to live with him and work for his family for the rest of her life. She is 9 years old. It is 1915. She is a girl. You know, this is a position in which she could be susceptible or vulnerable to sexual exploitation, to all kinds of physical violence, let alone that slavery had been abolished. And what I'm so grateful for is my great grandmother, whose name I just found out was Martha. Martha intervened and refused the doctor's proposal. She said, absolutely not, no way, in fact, never. And she picks up her ailing granddaughter, Arnesta, finds every concoction she can think of in her household, and she saves Arnesta's life. And for the rest of her life, Arnesta walked with a limp. And I talk about how that experience is very akin to the Black experience, that oftentimes the choices you are given are to live life in bondage or to refuse and limp. That racism and white supremacy handicaps you. And we don't talk about all the full ways that it has a detrimental effect on Black people's lives, that Black people spend most of their lives responding to, addressing, or avoiding the violence of white supremacy.
All right. Well, you and so in going through the sort of different elements of a response to oppression, the first is revolution, and you talk about the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah,
we've covered the Haitian Revolution a decent amount here over the years. It was maybe the only first, like sort of like maybe not just the first, but maybe the only complete sort of revolution, decolonizing and slave uprising, certainly in that era, and one which the Haitian people, to ultimately get the French to stop embargoing them, had to pay the value that France lost in the loss of their slaves, the free labor.
Yes.
And
they paid reparations to slaveholders.
To slaveholders, and that represented something like 25% of its GDP up until not that long ago. And so when we look at Haiti as a country that's, has all sorts of problems, contemplate the idea of this country having to pay 40% of its GDP over the course of 150 years or something. It's just absurd. But go ahead, talk about the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah, the Haitian Revolution. I mean, I feel like we don't do it justice. We make it a footnote in history, and I feel like it's a feature. In the age of revolutions, when we think of the American Revolution and the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution is the only revolution that actually abolishes the institution of slavery. In the United States, you have slavery for another 100 years. They're talking about liberty and equality and independence, and Black people are still enslaved. Like, Black people are actually serving Thomas Jefferson while he's drafting the Declaration of Independence. Like, George Washington is sending out slave catchers while he's also fighting the British, while he has enslaved people running away from him. Like, the hypocrisy knows no bounds. But when we think about Haiti, it's an all Black republic. It overthrows a European empire. It defeats Napoleon's empire. And it basically says, and we will be a free nation. We will be a free Black nation. And they paid heavily for that. Not just in the tax that came in terms of reparations for slaveholders, but in the way that we talk about the Haitian Revolution, the way that we have dealt with Haitians. It took until the Civil War for Haiti to actually get diplomatic recognition from the United States. It took a long time for Haiti to get back on its feet. And even then, the United States invades in 1915 and occupies it for another 20, 30 years. And we've seen all these different, puppet dictators that pop up. I think part of that is because, again, our unwillingness to acknowledge like what Black empowerment could look like, what it could be, what it could do, its full capacity. And I often say that the hardest part of a revolution is actually not achieving it, it's sustaining it. It's making it lasting. And even when we look at the American Revolution, I say that America was like conceived of in 1776, but it's not really born until 1863, until 1865, until you get the Emancipation Proclamation, until you get, the 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery. The United States really isn't the United States it could be until it reconstructs itself. And I see that as its revolution. I see that as its birthplace, really.
Let's talk about the concept of protection as we're looking at the sort of like the different, I guess, responses to, in some way, an unjust system. You write about Margaret Garner, about just before the Civil War, I guess. This would be in the 1850s.
Yeah, 1853. She's an enslaved woman who is running away with her family, with her husband and with her in-laws and their 4 children. And they lived in the slave state of Kentucky, which is a border state to Ohio. And during the winter, they decide to steal a horse and a sled, and they are going to make their way to the free state of Ohio. And they cross the river, which is frozen solid at the time, and they make their way to Ohio, and they're only there for a few hours before slave catchers, inevitably follow their tracks through the snow, follow them to Ohio, to where a family member's house that they were staying in. And Margaret Garner makes this horrific decision where she decides, I cannot go back to slavery. I will not send my children back to slavery. It is a fate worse than death. And so she decides to kill her children, that she would rather have them die than have them go back into slavery. And so she winds up slitting the throat of her youngest child. It's horrific. She's telling her mother-in-law, help me, mother, help me kill the children. It is terrible. It is blood everywhere. There's banging outside the door. The U.S. Marshals are there. They're trying to ram in the door. And when they finally get the door open, they see this bloodbath. They see her youngest child, Scylla, that has been slain. They see her attempting to try to kill another child. It is an awful, awful, unimaginable moment. And it's one of 2 things happens. One, the South uses it as a way to say, see, Black women are unfit to be mothers. They're not good mothers, and she should be punished for this. It's another way for the abolitionist movement to see, slavery is so horrible. It is so violent. It would drive someone to kill their children. And really, Margaret Garner is left in the middle of that, trying to reconcile what is the best decision that she could make for her children. And, as a mother of 3 kids, I have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old. I cannot imagine being in that predicament. But it does shed light just on how violent slavery was and how much parents did not want their children to experience it. The coroner's report talked about how Scylla was very fair skinned, how she had, like blonde hair and blue eyes, which to me says that she was probably a child of sexual assault, that rape was rampant in slavery. And this was something she did not want her daughter to experience. Later, Margaret Garner winds up dying in the institution of slavery. And Her husband lives, and on her deathbed, she says, promise me that you will marry a free woman next. Promise me that you will not have any more children in slavery. And it's a harrowing story, but it's one that I wanted to talk about in terms of the chapter protection, because I felt like protection is such a radical act, that what she did feels so extreme to us, but at its heart, she was trying to express the greatest form of care and love and protection that she could give for her children, which was to keep them from the institution of slavery.
You also talk about the Underground Railroad under that rubric. I think it's somewhat self-evident, but it is, the idea, I guess, is really just sort of like what constitutes a very practical, pragmatic response. Maybe not necessarily pragmatic. I mean, but a practical response.
Pragmatic. I think that applies. I mean, when you think about the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850, it basically said that if you ran away from your slave master, that you could be retrieved. And it didn't matter if you ran away 5 days ago, 5 years ago, you could be living longer in freedom than you were in slavery. You could be returned to your master. It meant that the new Mason-Dixon line was Canada's border. So you really only had two options as a Black person. You could flee, you could try to get to Canada, or you could stay and you could stand your ground. And that's what the abolitionist movement was, and the Underground Railroad was. It was a collection of Black people that said, we're going to protect you by any means necessary, even at the risk of our own lives. And so I tell all of these really heroic stories of Black people and their white comrades that came to the help of these fugitives and helped them get to freedom and help them get either to the north or further north or get to, Europe or Canada. And these are stories that I think about now in my own 21st century mind. I'm like, man, would I have had the gall? Could I have hit someone? Could I have, threatened the U.S. Marshal? Could I have put my own risk at life? I don't know. But during those times, people put everything on the line to protect not just their family members, but strangers to help them get to freedom.
You mentioned, you touched on a little bit of force and the idea of, that people that we wouldn't have necessarily contemplated, your grandmother, I don't. But were armed, and that the idea of arming themselves. Talk a little bit, tell us who Carrie Johnson is.
Oh, Carrie Johnson. These are all good stories. These are all in the book. Carrie Johnson is a 17-year-old Black girl who's living in 1919 in Washington, D.C. And during 1919, historians know it as the summer of Red Summer. It's when racial riots are taking place all across the country. And so in Chicago and Little Rock and Washington, D.C., all across the country, there are these race riots, really massacres, where Black communities are being under attack by the Klan and white supremacists. And in D.C., the mob is at bay, and they are going through the Black neighborhood, and they are pulling Black people out of their homes. They're beating them up. They're throwing rocks into their homes. They're shooting in Black communities. They're dragging Black folks off streetcars to beat them up. They're lynching Black people on the spot. It is incredible. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month, is walking home from Howard University, and he sees a lynching take place right in front of him in DC. And so Carrie is this 17-year-old girl who's armed, and her father tells her, hey, listen, get high ground, get to the roof or to the second floor. If you see someone coming, you defend our household. And that's what she does. The mob comes marching down, about 1,000 strong of white people marching through her Black neighborhood. And she starts to take pot shots at the mobbers that are coming down her block. And the crazy thing is that there are police officers that are there, and they're not stopping the mob. Matter of fact, they're encouraging the mob. And the mob says to them, hey, there's someone in that window. There's someone taking shots at us. And so the police gather up and they go to Carrie's house. They don't knock on the door. They just knock the door down. They don't announce themselves. They go into this dark house, and Carrie and her father are hiding in her bedroom on the second floor. And as the officers creep up the door of the stairwell of this dark house, and they open up her bedroom, and immediately Carrie starts shooting. She is fearing for her life. She doesn't know who's on the other side of that door. And police officers are shooting at the walls. They don't know where the bullets are coming from. And within moments, Carrie is shot in the shoulder, her father is shot in the thigh, and Officer Harry Wilson is shot fatally, and he lay on the floor dying. And they drag Carrie and her father from under the bed. They march them out to the street. They cannot believe that a 17-year-old Black girl has fatally wounded this police officer. And the crowd and the mob is sort of standing there, almost ready to like lynch Carrie. And at that moment, it begins to like rain, like torrential rain pour down. And that is what saves her life. That is what quails the mob. And everyone decides to go home because it's raining, it's pouring outside. And the crazy thing about Carrie is that there's a trial. She's convicted, they appeal, and she's acquitted. They don't want to charge her anymore. They release her at 19 years old. She's free to go. And I'm like, what? It's 1919. This Black girl kills a cop, is free to go. What in the world? I mean, these are different times for sure. But I think part of it was that there was a lot of shame in the white community that this white officer could be killed by a Black teenage girl. And they didn't even want to put in the headline. They put in the headline, white officer killed by Negro. They wouldn't say that it was a girl. They wouldn't say that she was 17. They did not want to point attention to who she was. And it was thankfully the Black press that told her story over and over and kept it in the headlines so that she could get justice and for defending herself. And eventually that's what the judge says. The judge drops the charges and says she defended herself.
Do you think it was shame, or was it not wanting to reveal a potential vulnerability?
I think it was both. I think it was absolutely both. I think this is the only riot in the summer of 1919 where the white casualties are higher than the Black casualties, where there are 10 white people that are killed. And this sent a message that Black people would defend themselves, that they would be armed, that a lot of Black people who participated in this riot, they were veterans. They were coming home from World War I and they came home armed. And they were like, oh, here's what you're not going to do. We just fought and died and bled for this country. You're not going to ramshackle our communities. And they did not want to send a message of what an empowered Black populace could look like. And so a lot of these stories get buried. So a lot of my work as a historian is about trying to uncover these stories and to say, look at what happens when Black people fought back. These rebellions, these race riots get quailed when white people realize that their lives could equally be at risk.
And when you talk about that one, I mean, the invocation of the imagery, it reminds me of Breonna Taylor, but also, it reminds me about the historical either whitewashing or ignoring of groups like the Black Panthers, right? And their both armed resistance and also usage of like basically kind of community solidarity to build a fortress against these factors. Because at the time, like, I guess the question is the role of the state in violence like this, like, when we're now beginning to explore the Malcolm X assassination and the police's role in that violence. Can you talk about how that threat evolved of armed resistance, particularly in the civil rights movement?
Yeah, the police were not a friend to the Black community. They were not about the business of protecting and serving Black communities. And part of the reason the Black Panther Party started, it was initially the Black Panther Party for self-defense, was to protect Black people and Black communities from police assault, from police brutality. They would do this thing called like cop watch, where basically if someone got pulled over by the cops, the Black Panthers would show up and they would watch, kind of like the same way we do with our cell phones today, where we have like, an eyewitness to what is happening in this altercation. But what's interesting about the Black Panther Party, and what I think a lot of people forget, is that within the first year or so, they put down the guns. They put down the weapons. They were like, actually, this is kind of a double-edged sword. This is making us more a target of violence than it is like a beneficiary of it. And they realized what was more important in their community was to make sure that their community was fed and healthy and literate. So they started free breakfast programs that spread all over the country. They had free health clinics. They had sickle cell testing. They had an ambulance program. And I think Hoover realized as well, the director of the FBI, that what was more terrifying to an American populace was actually not armed Black people. It was fed, literate, healthy Black people. And that is why they came after the Black Panther Party. You know, we have the Black Panther Party to thank for free breakfast today. My kids live in the lily white suburbs and they have free breakfast and free lunch at their school because of the groundwork that the Black Panther Party put in. I think they realized that protection is not always about a gun. Protection is about food. Protection is about literacy. Protection is about good health. Protection is about a safe community and access to resources. And that for me is like the biggest success story of the Black Panther Party. But, you know, history has demonized them in such a way in which, you know, we see the berets, we see the black leather, and we're like, oh, they're, you know, they're terrifying. And that's actually not the work that they were invested in.
Let's jump to to joy in terms of how that can be an expression as well, because I want to also be able to sort of generalize this a little bit. But, but tell us about how joy as a tool to respond to injustice works.
So this was the best and hardest chapter for me to write. It's the last chapter. I really see joy as a weapon. I see joy as a bomb. I see joy as so many different things. And really sort of like the pinnacle of the Black experience is actually not one of trauma and violence, but one of joy and humor. And I sort of encapsulate that in the Alabama brawl. When we think about August of 2023, when these Black dock worker was attacked, and all of a sudden all these Black people came to his response on this dock in Alabama, and people are swimming to the dock, a 16-year-old swimming to the dock, and you've got a man swinging a folding chair. And what gave me so much joy in that moment is not just to see Black people defending another Black person. Absolutely, yes. But it was the memes and the gifs and the humor and the reenactment and the joy that came, like almost the celebration and mockery of whiteness in that moment, where it was like poking fun at white supremacy to sort of rob it of its legitimacy. Like that to me was everything. I saw people with merch. They had like folding chair earrings and they had t-shirts, and I was like, Black people, only Black people, we will make fun of something. We will poke fun. We will take something that could be, you know, really violent, like a white woman calling the police on Black people barbecuing, and we will make it a hashtag or a punchline. We'll call you Barbecue Becky, and we'll make jokes about that. And I think there are just ways in which Black people are always trying to sort of laugh to keep from crying, and sort of using joy to fortify them and to protect them during really hard and difficult times. You know, I think about the joy that kind of came from the pandemic. I mean, you think about people dying and sickness all around you. And again, the gifts and the memes and sort of the mockery and humor that came from that moment, I'll never forget that. And it just is a message to me that even when we see Black people marching in the streets and sort of chanting, I can't breathe, and then, you know, 2 minutes later, somebody will break out into the electric slide and Frankie Beverly will start to play. And then all of a sudden it's like a block party. And you're like, wait, how did we go from this to this? Because Black people need joy. We need joy in order to survive. It is what affirms our humanity. And so I wanted to end with that, because if we have nothing else, we have each other. And when we have each other, there is always joy and laughter to be found.
I mean, this is obviously, you know, people understand it's, you know, it's a history of Black resistance and the various forms that it takes. And on some level meant to be prescriptive in terms of a resource for future resistance. What about, like, you know, we're in an era where the need for resistance could be a little bit wider than within the context of the Black community and its allies. I mean, that you know, I mean. We'll find out with immigrants, right? But also,
trans people, women, you name it.
But also, you know, people who want, just broadly speaking, maintain some semblance of at least the structure of a democracy, as opposed to an oligarchy. What lessons can be taken here that are more, I guess, you know, that can be extrapolated, that aren't necessarily a function of history of oppression of black people in the context of this country, or endemic to cultural responses to this oppression. Like what are there lessons that you see that can be taken to a broader audience?
Absolutely.
Or I should say a broader, not audience per se, but broader, I guess, use.
Yes, populace, sure. I mean, absolutely. I didn't just write this book for Black people, even though I tell people all the time that this is my sort of love letter to the Black community. Refusal is collective and refusal is global. And you see that all over the world. You are seeing people refuse tyranny, refuse oligarchy, refuse, these really oppressive systems. And I think now more than anything, we need deep and wide coalitions. We need people coming together to push back, to refuse against the power structures that be, because we're all getting our clock clean. We're all paying $12 for eggs. We are all having to navigate healthcare in a very unjust system. And so I want people to refuse, and I want people to sort of kind of take a letter from Gen Z. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned from my students, it's that binaries do not serve us well. The idea that it's right, it's wrong, it's good, it's bad, it's black, it's white, it's this, it's that, it's violence or it's nonviolence. I think we have an array of tools at our disposal that we can get creative, that we need everyone. We need the engineer and the poet. We need the graffiti artist and the medical doctor. We need the teacher and the politician. This is an all hands on deck moment. When we refuse, we have to stand up against all of these power structures. Now, I make it plain in the book. Like, if you want a 3-point plan, if you want a formula, that is not this book. If you want me to solve racism by 2035, that's not going to happen. But I think if you want to talk about what's not working, we should talk about that and discard that. And we should start to get really creative about what could work. What possibilities do we have out there? How can we gather all of our efforts and talents and abilities and chip away at this problem? We're not going to swallow the ocean. I can't do that, but I can do what I do best, which is write books and teach history and speak about this. And others will find their own talents and abilities to partner with others and to keep that work going.
It seems to me that one of the biggest challenges, and again, yes, I don't know if anybody has a solution at this moment of any of this, but how do these sort of methodologies or perspectives of resistance get translated when you're talking about populations that have not been defined by their fate? So in other words, solidarity across amongst black people, it was sort of defined by the oppressor on some level. You guys are slaves, we're all slaves, or we're second-class citizens, or we're being discriminated against. If you say, a poet or a plumber, if we all do poetry together, we have at least some comment. Like what becomes the how do we create around what that solidarity?
The coalescing, you mean the coalescing factor? Yeah, I think, and maybe
particularly when there's a significant percentage of people who can just say I can pass.
Yeah,
I can pay whatever that translates into.
I mean, listen, I think
my taxes are being cut, so.
I think there are a lot of people, and that's why Trump is in office, that voted not just in their interests in terms of white supremacy, but in terms of the aspirations that whiteness provides. And I think that, you will find people all the time that are not white, but aspirationally seek to be, or in close proximity to that kind of power structure, and that will sell out again and again to get some sort of power or to gain some sort of protection. But I think at the end of the day, and maybe this is the optimist in me, maybe I'm wearing rose-colored glasses, but I think we all want healthy, bodies. We all want healthy communities. We all want to be safe. We all want to make a decent living. We all want to be able to afford the homes that we live in. We all want to be able to have access to education. We all want to be able to live our lives. You know, trans people want to be able to live their lives safely without harm. Most people who are undocumented workers, they want to be able to live their lives. They want to be able to provide for their families. And I don't think what people want is sort of so far-fetched. Now, is everyone going to be a millionaire? No. Should everyone be a millionaire? No. But should everyone have access to housing and to healthcare and to education and to job opportunities and to be represented when they turn on the TV and when they see, you know, art performed for them? You know, I think those things matter. I actually think more people want that than not. And I think that we have a lot more in common than we think. You know, whiteness and white supremacy is a problem, but so is capitalism. And capitalism is cleaning a lot of our clocks. You know, so is patriarchy. Patriarchy is cleaning a lot of our clocks. And I think that when we galvanize against those power structures, when it's not just about whiteness, when it's also about wealth, and I mean uncontrollable, unsustainable kinds of wealth, when it's also about, you know, marginalizing a whole half of the population, those are things that have to be tackled. And I do think that there's more solidarity than there is opposition. And I tell people all the time, if this is encouraging to them, because I studied the abolitionists, my first book was on the abolitionist movement. The abolitionists were only 1% of the population. 1%. Like, they were not all of the North, you know, they were a small sector. And I think all you need is a small group of committed people willing to make sacrifice, willing to find consensus, willing to find solidarity, and you can change the world over. The abolitionists did it. And I don't think we necessarily need, everyone to be in agreement in order to do this work. We need committed people. We need people willing to make sacrifice and people willing to work together.
Kelly Carter Jackson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, author. The book is We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We'll head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will, do our best.
We're going to hope to take calls. Sorry about Friday, folks. I know we tried our best, but we had a little bit of a technical issue, so we're going to try our best to...
I sabotaged the call-in system.
Yeah.
Since I wasn't going to be here. I wanted to be able to... I was afraid that Emma wouldn't keep people on hold long enough and then never get to their calls. And so I sabotaged.
Or you were afraid I'd do it better.
You keep people on hold longer and never get to their calls?
Shorter.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, all right.
That's what I said.
Okay.
Emma's pissed because Saturday night. It's not a big deal.
No, I'm not pissed. This has been one of the worst sports years of my life. Truly. I mean, at least the Knicks are good, but Jesus
How many
Christ.
people actually even say
it's
that?
It's time for them to really break your heart in the playoffs.
Truly. But every Giants fan, I mean, at least think of us, folks. Saquon Barkley leaving the team and then winning the Super Bowl that year is rough. Not great.
After the
Having
Celtics,
the sixth best
on our rival.
After the Celtics-Knicks game, I just texted Emma saying, it's tough to play the Celtics after a loss because they come back and actually are focused. And she blocked me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Didn't.
Yeah, it's going to make work communications a little tough, but I have to stand on principle.
Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. Listen, I wanted to say this. I don't know how many people will catch on this. If you're in D.C., today at 4:15 p.m. Eastern at the Consumer Financial Protection Building at 1700 G Street, Northwest in D.C., there is a rally to protect the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Warren will be there, Maxine Waters, additional members of Congress, Move On Civic Action, Indivisible, Progressive Change Institute,
Worth making these as big as possible, because when the lawsuits get written up, the protests are mentioned as one of the reasons to maybe cause a delay in action.
Definitely. And also it's important, the idea, and I don't know how much, the Democrats are taking advantage of this situation to the extent that they can. All of this work should have been done years and years ago, to the extent that, that you can. But letting people know that the government does good things that are not necessarily obvious to a lot of people. Millions of people have received, like, I got a check, or I got, my money didn't disappear. Allowing people to know and helping people understand that these are big agencies, that they impact, just as an example, like, you're going to notice, you're going to get more junk calls. If you rent now, like one of the first things I think the FCC chair did was, when they got in, is allow landlords to sell your information to junk mailers and to, that have been basically outlawed under, I think, the Biden administration. You're just like, things that affect your quality of life are going to be impacted in ways that you'd never realized government was doing something about it or could do something about it. So this stuff is pretty important.
I mean, look back at the New Deal. The FDR was doing fireside chat saying this is what a deposit is and this is how we're defending it. And then you have the anti-FDR, Barack Obama, saying Joe Biden sent you a check during the pandemic, just like I gave people relief during the Great Recession. The thing is, we didn't put our name on it because it wasn't about feeding our egos.
When I think about Barack Obama, I think about someone with no ego.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hey, I'm the guy who, what about me? I'm the guy, I can't even do it.
It's kind of like how our side...
do you see what I did with NATO?
There's people who think propaganda is like a bad thing. No, you should, when you do something good for people, you should propagate it into their brains.
This is what I have pessimism about this, but this is what the lesson should be from Trump, which is, when you have power, wield it, do it, be loud about it, advertise it, piss some people off. Like,
even the parliamentarian.
I mean, there's even the parliamentarian, as you say, like, just from pure politics standpoint, the Democrats are so behind in understanding certain things, but particularly the media environment of always being in the news and making it clear what you're doing, communicating in like this incredibly saturated and corroded media environment. What's going to cut and break through? That's part of why Trump won again, is he's always breaking through by being an idiot. But the Democrats, they don't have that capacity. So break through by breaking things and doing stuff for, not breaking the government, but doing stuff for the people. That's how they have to do it.
What's their Project 2025? To build back? Like,
yeah.
Even Build Back Better was a rear view mirror oriented thing. I mean, they did the infrastructure bill. Nancy Pelosi was saying it through the entire time. This is a once in a lifetime thing, which was like, it shouldn't be. That should be a every 5 years thing, probably, at the state of this country. Look at air traffic control towers. Probably could have used some more investment.
Yeah.
Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you get the fun half. And you help this show survive and thrive. JoinTheMajorityReport.com.
We're going to thrive for the next 4 years. We'll survive, maybe.
You'll help this show survive and wilt less.
We'll try to not turn insane like
survive
other
and
people
maintain.
in this industry.
Yeah.
So far, going, I would say fair. It's only been less than a month.
Brain rot prevention. That's what all the new subs are going to go towards.
Exactly. Oh, God. Just like literally, like it is like every day we're it's like the support stuff from the NIH grants, and in this case it's going to be sort of like a slight electrical charge in our beds to just say like, no, you got to get out of bed today, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not being kind to my brain, but it was hard not to just constantly check, like, what has Elon destroyed now?
Oh God, it's unbelievable. You can't do this job unless you have somewhat of a propensity to be obsessive about politics. And the problem is that if there's more, if you are aware that it's possible, like, oh, wait a second, if I just search one more thing, there could be more info there. It becomes a problem. And in this environment, that's all there is. It's just like, well, I know I checked 30 seconds ago, but it's 30 seconds later.
Yeah.
And so there could be more news.
More destruction.
Anyways, if you find this helpful at all, join themajorityreport.com.
Speaking of more news, though, some good at least, a federal judge has determined that the Trump administration is violating his order lifting the blanket spending freeze on federal grant programs. So the order it says immediately unfreeze funds, including for the NIH and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
We're also waiting on that, I guess, the hearing regarding the buyouts for federal workers.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, if you need to stay up or get yourself going in the morning so that you can check more news, justcoffee.coop.
Yes.
Movement partners, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Emma, anything happening in sports?
Yes, on the SVN, we will obviously be talking about the Super Bowl, the fallout, the lessons from it, how the Eagles were able to pull it off. I mean, spoiler alert, it's because their defensive line is one of the greatest in history, and they didn't have to blitz at all. And then when they can drop a bunch of guys back into coverage, that's how you beat Mahomes. Anyway, should have seen that before I made my pregame pick, but youtube.com/ESPN show today.
You're not doing great in pregame picks these days.
I'm above 500 this season. But...
I was also talking about other areas.
All right. Kamala?
Jim Cramer over here.
Sorry.
What?
Celtics are going to beat the Knicks. Let's just put it that way. I'm banking on that.
Oh, yeah. I'm having a rough predictions of kind of, I don't know, few months, but youtube.com/ESPN show.
Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We had a Sunday show where I told David, who, like Emma, is an anti-Eagles fan because he's a Cowboys fan.
Yeah.
I've always loved the Eagles. Congrats, Philly. I like your city. I like your players. I like to see the beatdown of the Chiefs. That was very satisfying. And also we talked about an idea I had where Labor figures out how to replace South Carolina in the primary in 2028 and decides their own candidate. And Van Jackson of the Undiplomatic podcast had a good idea on that, which is that only people within unions get to vote on it, which might have the upside benefit of encouraging people to unionize, which I don't know. I kind of like that idea. I think every unionized worker would be more representative than South Carolina voters, in my opinion, in who should run the Democratic Party, but that's just my brainwave. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning, talk about that, and people have a problem with it.
Majority Report wardrobe coordinator asks, does a goat get blown out in 2 Super Bowls? I don't remember Brady ever doing that. I don't know. Folks, see you in the fun half.
It's ridiculous.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on? It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is this?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It
That's me.
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports.
We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go start life.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35. 501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we seen you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick.